right, everybody. Well, let's get this started. I apologize for any for not seeing you there. First thing, so we're here for Microsoft Identity, dealing with PowerShell and cloud identities and all of that. So we will plow through that. First thing, though, we can't do any of this, can't do any of these fun things without our sponsors. So we're going to take a look here. We've got 9 or 8 great sponsors, Veeam and some other great folks, AvePoint, some of the big names in SharePoint. These folks have been around forever. And the slide's there we go. I hope, can you hear this?
Don't hear anything at this point.
All right. So let me pull this back. Probably because I got all the sound going through my headset. Let's try it now.
No, when you shared your screen, did you share desktop audio?
Well, that's a good question. So I don't see that option. I see stop sharing. Do I have to reshare to do that?
Yeah, if you didn't before, I'd have to stop and then restart.
Well, that's no fun at all. Include system audio. There it is. Better?
Now we got some stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if there's still audio on the video. I'm not hearing anything.
I'm hearing it through my desktop.
There we go. Now I got you.
Oh, okay. So it's come through my mic. Okay. So thanks to those folks for sponsoring this track. Also would like to encourage you all to give a little bit. Some great charities here, and they've made a good use of QR codes. A lot of QR code abuse out there. I don't condone that activity, but these folks have done it the right way. So grab your cell phones and you can throw some money towards the Children's First Fund. Right now is obviously a pretty crazy time all over the world. And if you're in a position where you can help some folks out, there are a lot of people that are hurting, and it just, any kind of donation, anytime makes a big difference. But this year you get like 3 times back on your return. If you give money to any kind of charities, it just makes you feel 3 times better than it would have 12 months ago. So go ahead and kick some money towards the Children's First Fund. Help them out. Plus there's a raffle. You can make it for yourself too. All right. Well, so let's get into it. This might be my favorite slide in the whole deck. It's all downhill from here. This is me. I am Todd Klindt. I will be your speaker, your guide for the rest of the session here. And I've got the chat room open, so I'm going to be watching that back and forth, but by all means, chime in, do whatever. Any of you who've been to my sessions in real life know I run a real interactive session, so jump in, ask questions, correct me when I'm wrong, all that kind of stuff. So you can do that. But if you want to reach out privately, you can reach out to me. I got my Twitter handle on there. I've got my email address, which is most every piece of information I could think of to fit into an email address. My first name, my last name, my company, what we do, all that kind of stuff. So todd.klindt at SharePoint/SympraxisConsulting.com. I was also going to put these slides out at a short URL, and I forgot to. I think the event folks are going to make them available to you. But if you want them or all of the code that I'm going to use, the PowerShell, I've got in a PowerShell file, I will make available to you as well. So reach out to me. Everything that I've done, there's no secrets here. So let's go ahead. We'll just reach out to me. One other thing that I wanted to mention, because I've kind of got the session that kicks off this track, the security and administration track, is how awesome this event is. This year has been insane, obviously, for events. I really miss getting out to talk to you folks. I miss going to I spoke at the Chicago conference or the SharePoint Saturday before many years ago. I miss doing all this. And I just want to tip my hat. If I wore a hat with my hair, I probably should, to the conference folks who put this on. They've put an amazing thing on and kept these opportunities going for folks like me and folks like you to learn from it. So from what I heard, there's like 1,000 people who have showed up. There are 13 tracks. Holy cow. I've got like this huge 39-inch monitor, and I need almost the whole thing to see the schedule for this event. It is amazing. They've done a great job. 8 different time slots, lots of sponsors, 2 sessions on PowerShell, this one and another one. So I do like that. I'll be sitting in the other one. Only one guy named Todd, so we'll have to fix that next year. But there are like 100 speakers at this event. It is amazing. So thanks to the event folks for putting this on. Thanks for including a little old guy like me from Ames, Iowa. I appreciate it. So hats off. And if you've got a chance, jump into one of the many chat rooms. Thank them all. Ryan, who's in here suffering through this, and Jay and Ralph and Michael, all those folks have done a tremendous job, and I appreciate it. I really do. I miss this stuff. Boy, do I miss it. So what are we going to talk about in this session? So the problem that we're going to talk about in this session is how much Todd hates typing passwords. That's really what this all comes down to. This session is like 6 years in the making, and it all boils down to how much I truly hate typing passwords. And I hate typing passwords for a couple of reasons. The main one is because being in the security or the computer industry and seeing the security bits, all of my passwords are pretty nasty. So they're all passphrases, or if they are passwords, they're just a jumble of characters. And not only are they nonsensical, but they have lots of symbols in them, uppercase, lowercase, numbers, punctuation, clicks, bangs, blood samples, all that kind of stuff. I want my passwords to be really secure. So that makes them really tough to type because there's shift this and control that and meta. It's just really tough to type. And I just hate typing them every single time. And also because I understand the security implications, I have different passwords for everything. So I've just got hundreds of passwords to keep track of. And I really hate typing passwords. The other thing is I do a lot of sessions like this where I type in front of an audience, and I can't type with people looking at my fingers. It's horrible. So I really hate typing passwords. And then as in my journey through PowerShell, there's like a PowerShell maturity model. You grab a one-liner off the web that does a thing, and then you pipe it to something else that does a thing and all that. As you move through that, you start automating things. And now that we're talking to the cloud, we don't have the luxury of just popping onto a SharePoint server and running some PowerShell that runs against the object model. Now we've got to authenticate against the web, and you have to have passwords. And so really what this just came out of is me just hating to type passwords. And so these are kind of some of the things up here that I've that we can benefit from by using some of these methods that I'm going to talk about. Typing passwords is prone to error. That is one of the things that I really hate is when I type this, 37 character passphrase that includes all sorts of shifting and my fingers are aching and all that. And then it's like, yeah, username and password's wrong. I'm like, ugh. The other thing, the killing automation, so just having scripts that run all the time. Azure functions, you want to start using those things out in the cloud. You can use PowerShell with Azure functions. I think that's what the other PowerShell session's about today. You have to find some way to do that because you obviously can't log in to Azure and all that. And because passwords are tough to type and all these other things, it encourages some bad behavior, putting passwords in plain text and things like that. So that's the problem that I'm trying to solve here is really most all of my blog posts and all of my conference sessions are all about things that have annoyed Todd. Fortunately for you all, a lot of things annoy me. So I've got a lot of material out there. We got a wide breadth of things to do. So I've talked about how these passwords and all that have led to some bad ideas. And I have done many of them. I've got a couple of blog posts that I'm certainly ashamed of right now that show some of these bad ideas. One of them that we are going to talk about, we're going to show in the demo, is typing your password in plain text. So now we're sort of in the context of automating scripts. So one example that I'm going to use a lot today because it's one of the latest projects that I've done is I've got a customer that's moving from on-prem to Office 365, and they have some extension attributes that they were using on-prem for audiences and things like that, and they want to use that for Office 365. Cool, that functionality is all there. So they're syncing from Windows Active Directory to Azure Active Directory. Check, that's all good. And all those, they've made sure that those extension attributes are synced to Azure Active Directory. So that's all good. But unlike on-prem SharePoint, we can't go to the SharePoint user profile service and sync to their Azure AD bit and bring those properties over. So I have had to, for a couple of customers now, write a bit of PowerShell that pulls users out of Azure AD and pulls those extension attributes out, manipulates them a little bit because they're not exactly the way that SharePoint wants them. Saves them into a JSON file, and then takes that JSON file and submits it as a user profile sync job. And then that goes into SharePoint. SharePoint parses the JSON file and then adds those properties to the user. And then now audiences can be based on that. So it's for one company, it's like their office name and their employee status. So whether a full-time employee, a vendor, whatever. And so that's something that obviously has to run periodically because new people are coming in, people's status change. And not only does that have to run periodically, it has to hit the cloud, and it has to hit two different services because it has to hit Azure AD to pull the information down, and it has to hit SharePoint to upload the information. So that is one of the projects I'm working on. I'm going to cite that one a lot. In the past, certainly not for production things or for customers, but I would have written that PowerShell and I would have put those passwords in plain text in there somewhere. And when we get to the demos, I'll show you how I did that in the past. Not as prescriptive guidance, but as to show you a bad thing to do. So you know what to look for, you can pull it out. But that was one of the things that I would do. Put them in plain text. So then a few years ago, I stumbled across this idea that I can encrypt passwords in a file in PowerShell. And that was a big change for me because now I don't have to have them in the script in plain text. I can put them in plain text once into a file. The file's encrypted. The only people that can decrypt it are the user that I encrypted it on the machine that I encrypted it on. So that was a pretty good thing. But none of them were really great ideas, and they did scale really well. And they felt sort of one-off. They felt kind of dirty. One of those things where after you do it, even if it works, you sort of feel like showering with your clothes on just to get the stink of what you've just done off of you. So we'll talk about some of those when we get to the demos. So what's some better ideas? So this is a thing that I stumbled across 2 or 3 years ago. I forget exactly when, but this idea that starting with Windows 8 or 8.1, they all kind of muddle together for me. Microsoft introduced the Windows Credential Store. And if you go into your Windows 10 box now and you go to the Start button and you type cred, one of your things that's going to pop up in the search is the Windows Credential Manager. And this is where Windows stores all the passwords and the credentials that it uses to get you through the day. Every file share you connect to, ask your parents or your grandparents about file shares, but file shares, terminal services, things, anytime you've ever did that, remember me and all that, websites, things like that, that all get stored in the bowels of Windows in this safe encrypted place that Windows keeps an eye on, and all the great security folks at Microsoft have made sure that that's safe. It is possible for our PowerShell scripts to interact with that credential store. And the great thing about that is we don't have to worry about any of the mechanism. We don't have to worry about whether we've done something dumb and made things unsecure or left some passwords hanging out. Windows takes care of it. We just use the endpoints that are there. We just write them in there and we let them do it. So we have a couple of ways that we can do that. One of them is we can carve these things by hand. So we can go into that Windows Credential Manager and write out a new credential. We'll show that in the demo. And that works. And that's how I started doing it. I would go in there and make these credentials and make them by hand and then use them that way. And then there were some modules out there that handled them. So one of my favorites back in the day was one called Credential Manager. If you go to the PowerShell gallery out there, it's still there. It is such a like the guy that wrote it. I think there's 2 versions of it, version 1 and version 2. Version 2 came out like 3 or 4 years ago, and it is so rock solid that he's not had to change it. It does exactly what you want. It reads credentials from the credential store, adds credentials from the credential store. That's it. You're done. And it is exactly the thing that I needed. So I've got a blog post out there about that one as well. So that was really great. So that allowed me to write PowerShell scripts that would connect against anything, the cloud certainly, but anything, and securely pull passwords from the credential store on Windows without me ever having to see a password in plain text or put it in plain text, or my users even to see it. So that was a big win for me. And I thought that was, thought we were kind of at the pinnacle, at the peak. But then I started poking around in the PNP PowerShell. Now, for any of you who have lived under a rock or in that vault from that previous slide and have not seen the PNP PowerShell, let me tell you a little story. So way back, a long time ago, Microsoft noticed that some developers, well-intentioned developers, good people, loved by their families and friends and all that, were writing code for SharePoint, and they were doing a bad job. And so Microsoft, who wants everybody to be happy, said we should put out some patterns and practices for these folks so they can see how they should write their code and see how, kind of what we're expecting when we write the back end and things like that. So they started this PNP, the Patterns and Practices Initiative. And there were all kinds of different types of PNP, how to write event handlers, how to write web parts, whatever. And one of those projects was PowerShell, how to write PowerShell in the prescribed way from Microsoft. So the PNP PowerShell came out. And originally it was just sort of examples of how other people should write PowerShell. But then those folks were writing some really good examples, and folks like me were downloading these examples and just using them because I can't write code. And so that happened years ago, but now it has turned into this thing. There's this PNP PowerShell module, this just behemoth of a module that everybody who works with Office 365 and PowerShell uses. It's got like 800 or 900 commands. I've sort of lost count at this point. And it comes out once a month or so, and that is just what I use for everything. So when I start writing a PowerShell solution for a customer problem, that is just where I start. And if I have to bring in some other modules, so be it. I'm not against that, but the PowerShell does most everything. And what I discovered really late, because I'm just not very smart or don't notice things, is that the command that you use to connect to Office 365 with the PNP, connect PNP online, it's a really versatile command, and it has to be because there's a lot of different connection methods into Office 365, and it handles most of them really well. But I noticed really late in the game that one of the things that it will do is it will use credentials from the credential store. So if I have a Windows credential, if I've gone in the caveman way or with my Credential Manager or whatever, and I've created a credential in the Windows Credential Store, when I use Connect PNP Online, I can tell Connect to use that credential, and I don't have to type a password. It just pulls it right out of there. Oh, it's like that whole chord thing with the angels singing and the light coming in. That was a huge deal. So I sort of progressed through that. So I'm like, all right, great. So now I've got this credential out there called, Todd's website, connect PNP online, the URL, credential, Todd's website, and it would connect, and it was awesome. And I thought I was the smartest man in the world. And then I was watching a session that Erwin, the godfather of the PNP PowerShell, do, and he was showing that not only does Connect know to look in the Windows Credential Manager, because it's just that smart, but it also will go look, if there's no credentials provided with Connect, it will go look in the credential store for a credential with the same name as the URL that you're connecting to, and if it's there, it will just use it. Like, oh my God, that is brilliant. So now, instead of saying connect PNP online -URL www.toddklindt.com/name Todd's website, now I can just do connect PNP online -URL www.toddklindt.com and then nothing. And if there's a credential in that credential store that matches that URL, it just uses it. And I'm like, man, this is awesome. This changes everything. So now I would go in with either the Credential Manager module or by hand and create those URLs or those credentials for the URL. And it just worked great. So I have to do that once per machine, per user, and it would just work. And I thought that was pretty smooth. But then the PNP folks took it even further. I noticed as I was, poking around and looking at these things that they also have a commandlet called get PNP stored credential. And that pulls Credential Manager credentials into, a variable or whatever. And at first I was like, I don't know what I would do with that because Connect already connects to everything the way that I need it to. So I'm probably okay. But then it occurred to me, I can use that for other modules. So I've got some stuff, again, we'll show it in the demos, where I can, PNP just connects on its own now. It sees the URL, it jumps in. But now I can run get PNP stored credential, save that to an object, and then use it for Connect SPO service, Connect Azure AD, any of those things, and it will use that same credential. I don't have to type the passwords anywhere, so that is pretty sweet. So I'm a big fan of that. That has changed everything, honestly. And I seem a little hyperbolic when I talk about this, but it really has changed how I deal with Office 365 and with customers and all that, because I know that no matter what, I will have to type that username and password combination or copy and paste it exactly one time, and that's when I put in their Credential Manager, and then I never have to deal with it again. And then there's a couple of other commandlets that the PNP has to deal with those stored credentials, removing them, resetting them, things like that. So as passwords change as they roll, you can fix all those. So that's the first part of what we're going to talk about. But that whole thing, being able to use the PNP, has just been great. So let's take a look at that. Let's see what that all looks like in practice. I've got a nice fade to my demo slide here. Get a little cup of joe. So let's jump over to my demo machine. Oh, all right, YouTube, you've been good to me, but let's scoot out here. Okay, so I've got a machine here, and it has some PowerShell commandlets on. Actually, let me switch my camera if I can, so that I can look at y'all. And if you've got any questions, go ahead and chat room. Of your questions is, why is your office so dirty? My only okay, so I've got some questions in the Q&A. Larry Kuhn, good to see you. Anonymous, hopefully you stuck around. Hopefully you're still in here. We'll miss you if you're gone. All right, so we're on a machine here, and we've got PowerShell and all that installed. So I'm going to go ahead and open up PowerShell here. I have got all the things that I'm going to type in this demo. I have in a PS1 file, so if you want that, go ahead and shoot me an email or something, and I will get that for you. So you don't have to worry about copying these down. Not that there's really much to it, but just so you know. The other thing that I always do has nothing really to do with what we're doing in this session, but I always start a transcript file just to see what I'm doing. It's good when I'm spelunking around and trying to figure out how to do things in PowerShell. Kind of gives me a record of that. I will say, though, in the context specifically of what we're doing here, be careful, because if I start pasting passwords in, they're going to show up in this text file in plain text. So we don't want that. That's generally considered not a best practice. All right, so let me get my demos over here and kind of show what this looks like. So I've got I have a site that I want to connect to, and this is it. So we can see if I run it with no credentials or anything, I get prompted for passwords. So I'm going to throw that in there. This is my SharePoint admin. Oh, it's going to put a space at the end. We don't want that. So this is my guy, Pradeep. He is my SharePoint admin, and that username and password works. Okay, so just kind of show you there's no nothing up my sleeve or anything like that. Oh, we got to type PNP connection. Okay, so we can see I'm connected. We can see what I'm connected to. And actually, if I run this little piece of code that I should have just copied out, that tells me who I'm connected as. Okay, so I'm connected as this Pradeep character, and that works pretty well. So let's talk about how I can automate some of this, because that doesn't scale well. If we want any process to run like my profile sync thing. So let's see what we can do. So we've got this Credential Manager here. Again, this is just Windows. This is in every machine you've got. You can follow along if you want. This would show embarrassing sites that I go to if I was not using a VM. So we're going to go into the Windows credential side, the generic credential. We're going to call this Pradeep, because that's our guy's name. His username is right there. And we're going to put his password in. And to see if Visual Studio copies as well. Okay, so now I've got this Pradeep credential in here, so I'm disconnected. And if I do that, I'm not connected, big nasty gram. So now if I use my connect, I'm going to use the same one. Now, normally you've got this credentials parameter, and here you would put like a credential, a PS credential object or something. But the PowerShell or the PNP PowerShell is smart enough that if I just put a string in there, it uses that string. So if I give it the same name as that, it just pops in there. So if you've already got one in there, you can just use that. I'm logged in as my same guy. I'm logged in as Pradeep. So that's one great thing that I can do, but I still have to do all that typing at the end where I type -C tab, Pradeep tab. Ugh, so monotonous. So what I have found is that I can use that URL. I can create the credential with this URL name. Now, I could do that, and actually let me do this the other way too. So I'm going to delete Pradeep here, remove, and I'm going to try to connect here just so you can see that okay. So no entry, can't find Pradeep. All right. So when I was poking around, I found that the PNP has this great commandlet for creating stored credentials. So now I've got this, and it's add PNP stored credential, the credential name. So that's how it shows up in here. And if we refresh this page, there it is. And it's got that PNP PS deal in there. That's kind of how you can tell that it was created there. Okay, username, his username, the password, it's going to take a secure string, so I got to do this whole convert to secure string, blah, blah, blah. Please don't hack Pradeep's account. I know this is online right now. Please don't do that. So now if I do this, remember before it failed up here because that didn't exist. So now if I come up here and do it, now we're connected. So that's pretty slick. And again, we're connected as the same guy. So that has worked really well and has really changed a lot of how I deal with PowerShell. So I thought that was pretty cool. I was pretty proud of myself, like I said. But then I found that I could do the same thing with the URL. So, and we're just going to do it with PowerShell because that's the coolest way to do it at this point. So now I've run it. It's the same thing that I ran before, but for name, instead of giving it some kind of friendly name that I can remember, now I've given it the URL. Now, couple of things about this. There is a bug, or I believe still a bug, in Connect PNP Online, that if the credential name has a slash at the end, but the connection URL does not, it won't match them up immediately. And I think I've submitted that as a bug. It may or may not be fixed yet. I don't know. So the best practice that I have is when you create this name, do not put a slash at the end, because if you do, then it won't connect. Then you have to specify it manually. That's kind of a bummer. So now I've got this in here. So now I'm going to come up and I'm going to connect. But I'm just going to take all this away. I'm just not going to say anything. And it just connected. Like that's all there is to it. Oh my God, that's the greatest thing ever. I can imagine right now, I can't hear any of you, but you're all like clapping and yelling at your screen. I get it. And you can see that we've already got that. Now, what other great functionality they've added in here is it even works with upstream URLs. So let's say, and I don't have this in my demo. I should have checked to see if he has permission to this. But let's say I want to connect to some higher, deeper URL. So I've got /site/HR. The logic inside of Connect PNP Online is smart enough that if there's no credential passed, then it will look for this one. And if that one doesn't match, it will start taking things off at the slashes and matching them up. So let's see if he has permission. Ah, he doesn't have permission. Son of a gun. I should have checked to see. So we'll have to find one that Pradeep has permission to. But trust me, that one works. Now, where that doesn't work the way that we want it to is with the admin site. So I got to figure out how to submit that bug and word it correctly and all that. But that one gives me a prompt. So what I can do, though, is I can come up here and I can say, I get it, you're unhappy. I can give the credential name. So I can say this, and it will use it. So now I'm connected to the admin site as Pradeep. He's a SharePoint admin, so he's got permission to do all that. So that, so that's pretty cool. And we've, that's that things like, but again, we've got other services in the cloud that we need to connect to. And especially these days, man, you just can't connect to one thing. You got the graph and you got Teams and whatever. So how can we leverage this for other services? So like I said, we've got this get PNP stored credential. And so I can grab that and I can use it for other things. So now one thing that you can't do, and I assume that it's a security thing, is you cannot just browse that credential store. So I can't say, just show me all the credentials and I'll figure out which one it is that I want to use. You have to know the name. And again, I assume that's so that malicious code can't get in there and look for everything. So that shows me I've got the username and all that. This alone does not work. What I've discovered is you have to tell it what type of credential to give back, and you have to have it give a PS credential. So that looks like how we're used to seeing PS credentials: a username in plain text, and passwords as secure string. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign this to an object. And if I look at this object, that's our main pretty. So now what I can do is actually I'm just going to paste it out so you don't have to watch me type. I can connect to Azure AD. And I'm connected. So I'm connected as Pradeep, blah, blah. I can do get Azure AD user. And there's all my users. So you can see that I'm actually connected to that. So that's pretty cool. The other one that I use all the time. Let's get there we go. Is SPO. So I can also do, and I don't have this one in my notes. So if I need to do something with SharePoint, I need to give that a URL. Yep. So, because that one requires the admin URL. Do I have that? Yep, right here. Trying real hard not to make y'all watch me type. So now I'm connected to, get SPO, the SPO service. So again, this is, I've used this a lot in the context of the PNP, but once you get it in that Windows Credential Store, you can get it in and get it out pretty easily with anything else. So the last one that I wanted to tell you about is, well, so again, once I kind of figured this out, I'm like, all right, get command, show me all the other commandlets that have PNP stored credential as the noun, because that looks like fun. Let's do that. My copy paste failed. So you can see we've got add PNP stored credential. We've seen that one. We've got get PNP stored credential. We don't have a set. We can't alter them, but we can remove one and then re-add it. So we could remove that also. So those are some great things. Those legitimately revolutionized how I deal with Office 365. But I'm not done yet. I've done even cooler things. So let's go back and see what the last the coup de grace is at the end. I think I used that right. So we've got demos now. It was funny because right before I signed up for this session, I was talking to Ralph on some chat room. I forget. Ralph and I, we hang out, and he was talking about trying to connect some stuff, and he wanted to do it. I can't remember what his solution was, but I showed him this exact thing, and it was the solution that he wanted. So many. So the wrong. Oh, there's the right camera. Look at me. Okay. So Ralph was like, hey, I need to connect to a thing with some stuff, and I forget it's in the cloud and all that. I'm like, hey, Ralph, I know exactly what you need. He's like, well, what about I got MFA? What about that? Well, good. MFA is pretty much required for high or even reasonable security things. But now, if we've got MFA, how do we save the password in the Credential Manager and pull it out that, because we got the thing with the token and all that? This is where Azure App Registrations come into play. Now, Azure App Registrations are a crazy, scary, nerdy developer thing. I get that. I share your fear, my fellow IT pro friends, but I'm here to tell you that we can take this terrible, scary developer thing and bend it to our will and use it to help us log into things and get things done. So I don't pertain to know everything or even very much about Azure App Registrations, but I do know enough to get them to let me log into things in the cloud, and I use them all the time now. So I told you how I store my passwords and all that. I do that for most things, but there are a couple of things. If I need any kind of graph permissions or anything like that, or if I've got MFA, I just immediately do an app registration. I just don't even think about it anymore. I don't try to talk myself into it. I just do it. So what is an app registration? So this is the idea that the application is being authenticated against Azure Active Directory, not the user. And so we create this application, and then there's different security things that we can set up, certificates and secrets and thumbnails or thumbprints or whatever. And then when our PowerShell runs, instead of authenticating as Pradeep, now we authenticate against the application that we've created, but it has the permissions to do the things that Pradeep needs. And it doesn't use user permissions because it's not a user, it's an application. So it ends up using these very fine-grained graph permissions. If you've ever seen references to scopes, things like that, that is what these app registrations use. For folks like us, IT pros, they're sort of confusing. So I'm going to show you, kind of give you a quick primer. I'm not very smart, and so that's the good news is it's not going to be very complicated when I explain it to you, because that's that's just had to dumb it down for me. All right. So what are these Azure App Registrations? So if I'm gonna pop open this, I'm logged in as a tenant admin here. I'm going to go to Azure AD. And I sort of did the Julia Child thing where I put the cake in the oven and then showed you how to make the cake, and then I've got one that's fully baked in case we run out of time between them. So here I am in Azure AD, and if I go into Azure Active Directory, so portal.azure.com, I'm the tenant admin. I've got these app registrations. And there are a bunch already for other things that Microsoft put in. This is one of their demo tenants, but then these are the ones that I specifically own. I don't know if you all have heard, SharePoint 2010 workflows are no good in Office 365 anymore. And one of the ways to find those is with the modernization scanner that modernizes web parts and all that kind of stuff. So that works best with an app registration. So I actually did this one a while back. I've done that for a ton of customers. And then here are some other ones that I have created. So how do we create these things? We've got this new registration up here. Don't worry about all this. Don't worry about taking notes. I'm going to show you a better way to do it, but this is kind of what we need to do. So this is the user-facing name. This is just for dumb humans. So we'll call this Chicago 1. A whole bunch of options here. Honestly, I don't know what I would use them all for, but I know that the tenant only one is the one that I want. So I just leave that alone. Redirect URI. This is for actual applications and actual developers. We don't care about that. We don't need it, so I can leave it blank, and I'm going to do the register. I will also tell you that I follow some directions on a website that I will link if you want the permissions for that, or the link for that. There's a couple of really great blogs that just kind of walk you through all this. And I was going to have one open, and I have lost it. Okay. All right. So now what we need to do, we need to add some kind of security to this thing. It's not very secure right now. So we're going to go into certificates and secrets. We need to upload a certificate. Where do we get this certificate, you ask? Well, we're going to run some PowerShell. I'm going to go in. Oh, I didn't show you my bad idea. So this was back in the day before I was enlightened and all that. This was how I handled passwords in PowerShell scripts. Really bad idea, so don't do that. But you'll see this all over. And I bring this up again, not to tell you to do it, but as you're going around the web, grabbing snippets of PowerShell to run, if you see this particular practice somewhere, don't do it. Instead, do the thing where you connect like that, and it works. Okay, so one of the sites, and I think it's this one, I forget, kind of walks through how to create the Azure App Registration, and it's kind of the one that I'm following, but I need to create a certificate for this. So I've got this create self-signed certificate. I'm going to pop out in here and let's see, code, oh, documents. Okay. So documents, create self-signed code. I don't think I need to pass it any parameters. Oh, yeah, there we go. That's exactly what I need to do. Okay, so I should keep that open so I can see that example. And I'm going to go in here and I'm going to turn on the word wrap so I can see the whole example. Do I have this in my notes? I do. I already have this in my notes. So let's do that. Start date, end date on the 20th. Save that out. Okay, and again, I've got my notes here if you're going to want them. So I'm going to run this. Oh, geez. Okay, so I need to be I need an admin prompt. So that's this. I did that on purpose to demonstrate how that works. You're welcome. So now I need to go to the directory that is in. There we go. Okay, so what this is doing, and this is creating a certificate on my machine and self-signing it as the machine. It's calling it MC365 Chicago. The certificate starts on the 11th, it expires on the 20th, and it's got a password of pass@word1. I can see I've got my files here. Okay, so now I go back to my app registration and I upload a certificate and I select that file. And this is it. This is the one we just created, 949. I got to talk faster. And it's looking for the PFX files. It's not showing you the extension, but it's a PFX file. Oh, I wanted the, yeah, okay, the CRE file. CR file. So I want to add that one. Okay, so now it's in here. See this thumbprint? This is going to come up in the future, but remember that's one place where we can find that thumbprint. Okay, so we've got the certificate up there, and then we need to give some API permission. So this is how we actually give this app registration permissions to things. Right now, it has enough permission to log itself in, which is good, and read its own permission. So we're going to add some permissions. You can see we've got permission areas, so let's do some SharePoint things. We want application permissions. Delegated permissions are permissions to do things as other users. Application permissions are to do things as ourselves. So we're going to do SharePointy things. So we want this app registration to have permission to read and full control of all of the SharePoint sites, but you can just do read, read only, read write, whatever. Let's do read write all for the term store. That seems important. And read write all for the users. So this is the Azure AD users, the term store users, all of that. Let's add the permission. Now you can see admin consent requested. We need to grant that. So that means we need to really say somebody with permission needs to say it's okay for this app registration to have it, because regular users can create these things. So I'm a user that can grant that permission, so I have granted that permission to myself. Okay, so now I have this app registration, and I believe that is all of the steps that I need, but let me check my notes here. Okay, so now how do I connect with this critter? So I've got Azure AD Connect, or PNP Connect out here. It has some examples on how to use it. And I'm going to bring this up because I'm going to reference some of these examples. So you can see examples. There's a ton of different ways to do it. I didn't think any of this up on my own. 24 examples, 24 different ways. The way that I'm going to do it next is example. It's currently 18 or 19. I submitted a bug on that, but it's going to be one of these. You can see I'm using certificates and all that. Okay, so what do I need for this connection? And I'm going to create a thing over here because I've got one of my old ones, but obviously the information is going to be wrong. I'm going to PowerShell. Okay, so my common name is, oh, this is the one that I wanted. So that was the code that I used to create it. This is the code that I'm going to use to connect with it. So I'm going to connect to my admin site. The certificate path is going to be the name. So right now it is that one. Certificate password is pass@word1. That's what that one matches to. The tenant, so it's the tenant you're connected to. If you forget where that is, you can go to Azure AD. Actually, let's do this, open another window. So you can go to your Azure AD portal, and it's going to be this primary domain right here. If you ever see reference to needing the tenant ID, it is also right there. So that has not changed between my demos. And then the client ID. So the client ID is the ID of the certificate that we created, also known as the app ID in some places. So if you see this right here, this is it, application client ID. So I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste that in there. Okay, and now if I did everything right, I should be able to use this command to connect to the PNP Online. So first, let's make sure that we're not connected. Okay, no session to disconnect. Okay, and we're connected. Now there's this nasty gram here. We're going to talk about this in a second. But what if I'm really not connected? Like what if I'm just making this up? So you can see I'm actually connected to the tenant. I can get all the tenant sites, things like that. So now the great thing about this is, number one, it's not connected to any user. So users can rotate their passwords, things like that. The other thing that's great about it is you'll notice I didn't give the user permission to any sites or anything. So as a SharePoint admin with the SharePoint admin role, if I log in as Pradeep, I'm the SharePoint admin, but I don't have access to the sites. I have access to give myself access to the sites, but every time a new site is created, I got to give myself access to it. With this, I just gave it access to all of the sites, and no matter what happens in the tenant, it's good to go. And you can see that I gave it permission to all the users, the term store stuff, every bit of that. And you can, when we look at those API permissions, there was all kinds of different things in there. It's Exchange mailboxes, it's all over. So you can give really great permissions to everything that you need to give. And so that's just the way that I do things now when I do them. Okay, so we got this little nasty gram here that talks about might be filling up this directory and all this. This is where it keeps the machine keys. So this is what it's talking about, is this directory right here. I'm not terribly concerned about this, but it does say consider using Thumbprint instead of certificate. So I wanted to talk to you about how to do that so that you can get rid of this error. So let's disconnect again. And I got about 5 minutes. If there's any questions, if you haven't already moved on to your next deal, if you've got any questions, let me know. So the way, and actually just going to copy. I'm going to copy my other one because I don't have time to set the new one up. So this is the Chicago 2 one that I did yesterday. So there's a couple of steps. You need to take that certificate and you need to import it into the local certificate store on your machine. So for this one, it would be that, same password. So actually just do that. You'll need to do this in your admin window since you're dealing with certificates. So I want to do that. Again, there's that Thumbprint 1 Bravo, blah, 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 82. If I come in here, and look at the certificates, 1 Bravo, blah, 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 82. Okay, so that's the same Thumbprint. If you don't know the Thumbprint, you can get it from a couple of different ways. But now if I connect, or did I put it in here? If I connect, I can use that same thing. The client ID that I had up here, where's it at? This guy. I can use the new client ID. And then the Thumbprint that showed up in here, I can bring that in here. That should get me connected also. So I'm disconnected. There we go. Now I'm connected. No nasty gram, but I can still get all the sites. Okay, so the Thumbprint is, if you read some stuff on that, there's some questions about how secure it is. Again, now, if somebody gets this PFX file, you guys can't use this. It's all out here, but you're missing that PFX file, so you can't hack into my stuff. But that is generally considered to be a less secure way to do it. So I've just got a couple minutes left. So I want to tell you, you can go to reach out to me if you'd like. I'd love to hear what ways you use this functionality. I'm going to change my camera so you can see my face and outside of my head. This has been a big game changer for me. It was a little scary to get it started, but I was able to move all my connections over to that. And I think it's going to be a real benefit to you. So reach out to me if you've got any questions, tweets, emails, all of that. I would like to ask you to fill out some evaluation for the conference, for the session, all of that. I'll stay in the chat room for a few minutes and answer any questions that you have. But thanks, everybody. Thanks again to the folks that put this on, Craig and Michael and Jay and Ralph and all those folks, Ryan, who's in the chat room right now. I do appreciate it. And I'll see you later today in some other sessions, maybe. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Todd.